4 a.m. on Boxing Day, 1776. Already 4 hours behind schedule, the ragged group of patriots begin to file into rowboats in readiness to make the crossing, only able to see their breath in front of them in their pitch black, below 0 degrees Celsius conditions. The part of the Delaware they were crossing was about 300 meters bank to bank, but in between, the water was fraught with danger. Huge chunks of floating ice and debris coupled with rampaging currents were what was waiting for the crossing party. But that was the least of Washington's issues. Of the 3 contingents that were supposed to make the crossing, only one would attempt it. A series of defections warned the British garrison at Trenton of an impending attack on the town, and just to top it off, the sun would rise very shortly. Washington was about to lose the element of surprise. His sword's edge would be blunted by sunrise. The appalling conditions also meant that musket fire would be largely ineffective. The men were ordered to fix bayonets and prepare themselves for close quarters combat against the battle-hardened Hessian mercenaries who were said to be all over 6 foot tall and eat the hearts of their enemies. Despite all odds, Washington's army makes the crossing with little problems. Even the heavy guns and artillery make it across unscathed, a minor miracle. It's now 6 a.m. and the landing party begins to move silently south behind enemy lines towards Trenton. The sun now begins to rise as American scouts reach the outskirts of Trenton. However, a snowstorm hides their approach. An early warning of their arrival would spell disaster for the operation. It's 8 a.m. and the sun is well and truly up. The Hessian guards posted at checkpoints around the border of the town are completely unaware of the presence of 2,400 Continental soldiers amassing just a few dozen meters away from them. The American vanguard can see the outlines of the enemy soldiers which are illuminated by their torchlight, but the Americans remain completely unseen in the snowstorm. They hold their breath as they wait for the order to attack. Seconds feel like minutes, and minutes feel like hours. Finally, the order is given and the Americans charge into battle like lions, fighting for more than just victory. The overwhelmed Hessian guards quickly fall back as the fighting moves into the town. The enemy move out of their barracks half asleep and hungover. Adrenaline overrides these feelings as they scramble to make a defensive perimeter. But the Americans flood into the town, and savage hand-to-hand combat moves from street to street as the sound of the American guns and artillery boom overhead, firing down on the British from the heights above Trenton. The British begin to fall back to Trenton Bridge, which is in turn cut off by Washington. This forces the British to withdraw to an orchard outside of town to regroup and assess their options. The British commander, Colonel Roll, realizes that their lines of retreat have been cut off. He intends to retake the town. Roll leads a sortie to break the American lines and push them out of Trenton. Fierce fighting ensues. Many fall by the sword and bayonet. Any kill at that range means you watch the life leave the body of your enemy and hear their gurgling final breaths. The British are forced to fall back again, and in the chaos, Colonel Roll is shot off his horse and killed. This is the final blow for the Hessians, who fly the white flag of surrender by 9 a.m. 100 dead and wounded Hessian soldiers litter the bloodied streets of Trenton. As Washington tours the battlefield, his feelings of elation are short-lived as the impending realization that his job is not done dawns upon him. He is exhausted, mentally and physically, his clothes wet and his body cold. But he cannot rest. He must figure out a way to use the victory to the advantage of the cause. In a few days, his army's enlistments would be up. He must keep them under contract just a bit longer. On December 31st, 1776, Washington gathers his army, many looking forward to going home, and he makes an impassioned speech to them, pleading with them to stay. My brave fellows, you have done all I asked you to do, and more than can be reasonably expected. But your country is at stake, your wives, your houses, and all that you hold dear. You have worn yourselves out with fatigues and hardships, but we know not how to spare you. If you will consent to stay 1 month longer, you will render that service to the cause of liberty and to your country, which you can probably never do under any other circumstances. A heavy silence ensued. Nobody stepped forward. Washington's heart was in his throat. Was all this sacrifice for nothing? Just as the walls began to close in on him, a man stepped forward, then another and another, until over half the army agreed to re-enlist. Washington had his army. His mad, desperate gamble had paid off. The war would go on, and the United States would cling to its independence. The tide had turned. Despite all his flaws, despite those who spoke against him, he held it together where most would fall apart. Greatness had been thrust upon George Washington, and he rose to the challenge. Cometh the hour, cometh the man.